Okay, I am presenting on schizophrenia, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about this population. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder, can cause persistent, severe, and disabling psychotic symptoms, and this can affect every aspect of a person's life and how they're able to function. Symptoms fall into negative, positive, and cognitive categories. Negative being loss of motivation, social withdrawal, lack of emotions, things are taken away. Positive is where things are added in that are not normally there, so psychosis, delusions, hallucinations, thought disorder. And cognitive is more the executive functioning of a person, so difficulty processing information, focus and attention decrease, those sort of things. And these all contribute to potential economic instability, which is a social determinant of health that is compromised. Well, it can be compromised, and often is with this population, because they are at risk for unemployment and potentially have a very limited social support system, which can lead to housing and food insecurity. There's a high prevalence of homelessness within this group, as well as trouble accessing healthcare resources and being able to manage the condition medically speaking. They also have risks for comorbid conditions. High rates of suicide exist within this population, as well as an increased risk of alcohol and substance abuse. And media can play a pretty big role in how schizophrenia is portrayed to the public, really to the point where unless you have a medical background or know someone with schizophrenia, you may have a distorted view of what it actually is. Media often portrays schizophrenia as individuals being homicidal, having multiple personalities, which is actually dissociative identity disorder, and also being violent, which they are much more likely to have violence inflicted upon them than actually being violent towards others. Stigma occurs through language, using words like crazy, psychotic, deranged, insane, nut, things like that. And often it kind of paints those with mental illness as being not normal, and then those without mental illness being normal. So creates this us versus them mentality. Family support can play a pretty big role in this population. Can be very impactful. They are at risk for a limited support system due to social withdrawal and social functioning, possibly being impaired, as well as, and really this studies have shown that having a good social support system in terms of family can lower readmission rate. This can happen by obviously assisting them with day-to-day functioning if they need, helping them to maintain treatment regimens, and actually noticing when they need medical attention, when there's something they need attention for. Peers can also play a supportive role. This can come in terms of support groups, so this can help provide some hope. It can empower treatment adherence. It can provide a sense of companionship, being able to relate to others going through what they are, as well as provides an environment where information can be exchanged and education can occur, and what works best for them. So there can be a very cyclical nature here in terms of vulnerability. Socioeconomic challenges can kind of just perpetuate mismanagement of the condition by not allowing adequate access to resources. It can lead to mismanagement of the condition, and that just makes them more vulnerable to the things that they are already vulnerable to. So risk of homelessness, having food insecurity, further limited access to resources in healthcare, and therefore further lack of treatment or lack of adherence to treatment, as well as perpetuating comorbid conditions, risk of suicide, and alcohol or substance abuse. So policies can affect many different things. It can impact the cost of treatment or access to it, as well as coverage of treatment, how much something is actually going to cost, and various protections. Parity laws, things like what co-payments, deductibles are going to cost, differ from state to state, as well as limitations to treatment. And things like the right to least restrictive treatment, and the American Disability Act, so not being able to discriminate based on disability. And then Medicare is a federal program, obviously, but it can have limitations as well to how a person has coverage. So culture can potentially be a barrier here. Depending on the culture, it can add to some vulnerabilities in terms of when they report symptoms, or if they report symptoms, and how a diagnosis of mental illness is actually perceived or accepted, and how they go about it, meaning the concern level, like whether they are interested in treatment or will seek out treatment, as well as family being involved or having a support system that can be influenced by culture. And again, socioeconomic status can be a health disparity here. It has the potential to impact how vulnerable this population is. Again, disadvantaged employment opportunities. This population is actually 6 to 7 times more likely to be unemployed than the general population, as well as having a limited support system as another risk. Those things combined, again, create housing insecurities, access to food and healthy food choices, adequate healthcare resources, and whether they are able to adhere to treatment or not. Race and ethnicity can also have an effect here. Racial and ethnic minorities are less likely than majorities in the United States to seek out medical treatment, and this can stem from mistrust or fear about being discriminated against, or having language barriers, or having health literacy. These can all deter a person from seeking out treatment, and it can actually play a pretty big role in outcomes, delaying treatment until symptoms become severe. Religion can have an impact as well. It can be both positive and negative. Positive being that it can provide a sense of self or sense of recovery or hope of recovery. It can, if your family or support system shares those religious beliefs, can provide more cohesion, can also provide hope, meaning, comfort. But negatively, can also provide feelings of rejection, possibly disappointment, demoralization, and spiritual experiences may actually be ignored or treated as symptoms of the condition. And gender can make a difference here too. So women might actually have a better outcome potential than men, and this can be for a few different reasons. Findings with men include earlier age of onset of the illness, as well as how well they were able to function before the illness onset, which can make a difference in how well they function after the onset of the illness. They tend to have a greater severity of negative symptoms, and they also have a higher rate of comorbid alcohol or substance abuse. And location can make a difference as well, in terms of the treatment they are able to receive. Obviously, having access to more experienced providers is going to be helpful for their recovery, and that may be limited based off of where they are geographically, their physical location, and whether they are able to transport or have difficulties transporting. If there's a large distance between them and their provider. So telehealth can make a difference here. It can improve access and provide more continuity of care, reduces the need for travel and challenges that come with that, and makes it easier to regularly make appointments and stay up on that. So biases in regard to health disparities, there can be some public stigma, both implicit and explicit biases. Stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination exist. They can also, and this portrayal can lead to self-stigma, how they perceive themselves, which can actually add to harm or deter them from seeking out treatment or staying up on treatment. There can be implicit biases of healthcare providers, which is actually shown to create a tendency to overdiagnose and have more restrictive or controlling interventions, as well as explicit biases of healthcare providers, which can be related to more negative expectations of patient prognosis, so less that they're thinking that they're less likely to actually recover. And that is all I've got for you. Here are the references.